In this video, I'm going to try to tell you whether or not the new Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team Elites expansion is something that you'd be interested in. So those of you like myself who've been doing this whole Games Workshop thing for quite some time probably remember the old days where you never heard about anything until like a couple days before it came out, and then they would finally go, oh yeah, by the way, that thing's coming out, which there would be rumors and people would know about it ahead of time and it was a whole thing. Now, with Warhammer Community, that website, they really do the most of the rumors, except they're not rumors because, they're telling you what's going on, but they do a lot of what some people would consider spoiling ahead of time. So a lot of you have probably seen a good deal of what's in this book already, specifically the index page, or the table of contents, really. They released the table of contents which showed all the different stuff in there, and one of the things it showed was all the different units that are included in the Elites part of this book. And it's pretty interesting. There is a lot of stuff in there, I'm not going to lie. The concept behind this Elites book is thus. In the normal Kill Team core book, you are playing with regular kind of bog standard troops. And then they released Commanders earlier this year? I forget exactly when it was, but they released the Commanders book, which gave you these super powerful one person in the team sort of things. And when you would play the Commanders rules, you'd have to double the points of your games from 100 points, based off the points in the core book, to 200 points. And honestly, some of the commanders could use almost all of that 200 points just by themselves. As I've said before, the 4th level Broodlord was like 196 points. So, they gave you a lot of different options. You could take different levels of the commanders. The commanders could not level up, so giving you the ability to kind of, pick which level you wanted was sort of nice, because then you could kind of use that for the rest of your list and figure out what you were going to take in the list building. And it was relatively well received. And then a couple months ago, they announced Elites. Now, when I first heard about Elites, I was thinking to myself, this is kind of a intermediary kind of thing. It's between the commanders and the regular troops in the core book. So I was kind of right. But really, there's more to it than that. This book is also chock full of commanders, as it turns out. There's a lot of new commanders in this book. The Adeptus Astartes, aka the Space Marines, they have 11 new troops or figures or units or whatever in this book. There's 11 new ones in this book. A lot of them are from Shadowspear, which was cool. I kind of was hoping they were just going to release like a free PDF with here's the Kill Team rules for the Shadowspear box, kind of like they did with Blackstone Fortress, but instead that information's in here. So you've got that ability, but the trick is a lot. I think of the 11, I think 6 of those Space Marine elites that are in this book are actually all commanders. So you have to play them with the commander thing as opposed to just playing them as a standard elite. And that's kind of interesting. And there's a lot of other elites in a lot of the rest of the book. I would say the Space Marines got the biggest amount of units, and you could tell that from looking at the table of contents, but it was kind of interesting going through and looking at the different units and the specs and seeing how many of them were actually commanders and not what I would consider to be elites, because they're commanders. So I'm not going to lie, that confused me a little bit when I first got the book yesterday. And I've gone through and I've read stuff in here. And there's another thing also that I want to try to make clear. This is not a requirement, okay? For people who are like, oh, now I got to go out and buy that book because otherwise I won't ever be able to play Kill Team again. That's not true. You can absolutely keep playing standard, what they call core rules Kill Team. I see myself probably still playing a lot of core rules Kill Team for quite some time. We've barely, amongst the guys that I play with locally, just started actually using the scouting phase. Like when we first started playing, we'd look at the scouting phase and go, nah, and we just skip it because it was a lot of extra rules that we just didn't see the point to. We've started to actually use it, and I don't know, that's sort of cool, but I just don't know if it's necessarily, it's getting a little bit more to where we understand what's going on with it and we like it and we see the benefit to it. But, we're still predominantly playing vanilla. If you want to kind of upgrade your game, because it's not just the units in here that are part of the Elites book, but it's also a lot more kinds of upgrades that you can add to almost all of the armies that are available in Kill Team. And when I say almost all, I do mean almost all. I do unfortunately mean that the Kroot in the new White Dwarf update, where they gave the Kroot their own kill team army, they didn't get anything in here. And neither did the Servants of the Abyss, who are the kind of bad guys in your Blackstone Fortress box, and neither did either of the sides in the Rogue Trader box, the Gellerpox squishy dudes and the fancy Rogue Trader folks whose name I can't remember off the top of my head. But none of them got anything in this book, which is a little bit of a bummer, and I don't know why that was the case. I'm not sure why those groups were skipped. Maybe they'll get some sort of PDF download down the road. But beyond the units that are in this book, which are elites, and many of them also commanders, there's also a lot of, for lack of a better term, chapter tactics. Now, when I say chapter tactics, that relies on the fact that you're using Adeptus Astartes, aka the Space Marines. But there's also chapter tactics for everybody else. I forget exactly what they call them. But they are really interesting because they allow you, there's for Necrons, they're for Tau, they're Tau Septs, Necron orders, I don't know, I forget what they're called, but they're a lot of basically, your orc cultures, things like that. So you can say, okay, I'm going to use Evil Sons for my orc kill team, and then because all of your people are Evil Sons, then you get this extra added bonus. So what that does is it gives you a bonus, and you can kind of flavor your models a little bit more. When the game was first launched, you got your Space Marines, you got your orcs, and you could dress them up and make them look like Space Wolves, or you could dress them up and make them look like Evil Sons, or whatever you wanted to, but they all act exactly the same. All the Space Marines are Space Marines, all the orcs are orcs, all the Necrons are Necrons. But now, if you go with elites, one of the cool things that's in here is that you have the ability to go through and say, I want these guys to be Iron Hands, or I want these guys to be Black Legion, or I want these guys to be Tau something. I don't know what the Seps are all really about. But it gives you that ability to kind of match them to at least the way that you painted them, and that's really kind of interesting. But the trick is that the question's going to be, how's this going to work when you're playing with somebody who doesn't have the book? There are new missions in this book, as I assumed there would be. Every book that they've come out with has had some sort of new missions. But what makes this book different than this book is that in Commanders, when you're going through and looking at the rules, the scenarios, in the kill teams section, it tells you this is a mission for 2 to 4 players, blah, 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 all that stuff. And at the end, each kill team can cost up to 200 points and must include one commander. So if you're going to play commander games, you have to use commander-style scenarios. And the scenarios that are in this book are designed and say must have a commander. The scenarios that are in this book don't mention anything about elites. They do, for the most part, generally focus on the fact that you need 125 points, and I think that's because so many of the elites are higher point models in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even, which in a 100-point game takes up a heck of a lot of space. And if I could find the actual section with all of the missions. Here we go. At the end of that same paragraph, in the kill teams, for the different missions and things like that, it just says, basically, each kill team can cost up to 125 points. So there's no kind of rule that says if you're going to use an elite, do I have to use an elite? What happens if we just decide, now here's the big benefit, okay? Because we are reasonable people talking to each other across from a table, whether we're friends or whether we're just acquaintances at the game store, we can negotiate and hash this out. If I come up and I say, hey, let's play a game of Commander, and you say, didn't bring a Commander and I don't have that book, we'll be like, oh, okay, well, let's play a normal vanilla game. Or once you've got this in your sweaty little palms, then you can say, well, let's play an elites game. Now, the benefit here, in my opinion, is that I would say if you're interested in this stuff, you definitely want to have it. But if you go to the shop and you find someone who doesn't have this book, you can say to them, hey, let's play an elites game. And they could say, well, I don't really, have the elites book, so I don't know. And you can kind of, to some degree at least, share with them. Or you can even just say, okay, well, you take 125, I'll take 125, I'll throw in an elite, and let's see how this works out. Now, for those of you who are people who are really into tournaments and stuff like that, competitive play is a totally different animal. But if you've been playing competitively, you know that already. You have to pay attention to what the tournament organizer says. You have to check out the rules for the tournament before you go, so you know what's allowed, what's not, all that kind of stuff. So to say that I think that this is going to fracture the kill team meta, I don't believe that at all. I think that what this is doing is giving, again, more options. And I don't think that more options fracture anything. If anything, I think that having more options, having specific chapter tactics that you can add to your Space Marines, or seps that you can add to your Tau, or whatever the heck Eldar use. Enclaves? No. Whatever. Anyway, having all that stuff available to you allows you to customize and tweak your army. It doesn't cost any points. You just say, I'm going to do this. So your opponent can be like, well, I'm going to do that. Even if they don't have the book, they can go through and look at it. And you could at least play that way and say, well, let's try these different tactics and do that. And that's cool. If your opponent has maybe some extra models that are maybe something that shows up as being an elite in this book, then you can say, okay, well, here's the stats for that elite, and I'm going to use my elite, and now we can play a 125-point game and have a good time. There's nothing to say that you can't decide just to use the reserve rules that are in here, that's also a new thing, or just use the chapter tactics type stuff to have your armies, and stick with 100 points and not use elites and all that kind of stuff. This is an expansion which they call elites and has elite units in it, but also has commander units in it, and also has stuff that has nothing to do with either of those things. So it is basically giving you more flavor and a lot of other things. If anything, I think the elites is maybe a misnomer. Calling this book elites, in my opinion, only kind of touches on the surface, because there's also a bunch of commander stuff in there. There's a bunch of other added additional rules in there, new things, like I said, the tactics and the reserve rules, and they've got special stuff about, if you're having, at turn 4, you get to roll to see if they've got all kinds of new rules and things like that are additional options that you can play with. So if you're interested, it's not like the Commanders where it came in a box and there was some tokens and plus the book. It's just going to be the book. And if you're interested in expanding and trying new things with your kill teams, I would definitely look into this and see if maybe you pick it up, or maybe if you've got a friend who's already got it, you can maybe kind of thumb through it and check it out. I think it's got some really kind of cool additions if you want to go that way. But the trick is again, like I said, it's not something that you're being forced to buy. It's not something necessity. You can still play plenty of vanilla, core rules books. And I know I'll be still playing a lot of vanilla core rules kill team, but at some point I'm going to see myself starting to add more of this stuff into my list and into my gameplay at the local shop and at home and wherever I play. So if you're interested and you want to expand some things, take a look at getting into this. But if you don't, understand you're not going to be left behind. If the tournaments that you like to go to all switch over to starting to use all this stuff, well, that's going to be a different story. But if you're a competitive tournament player, you're probably used to picking up all the new stuff when it comes out. So check it out if you're interested. There's a lot to it. There's stuff in there for nearly everybody. Like I said, sorry, Kroot and Rogue Trader people and Servants of the Abyss. But pretty much everybody else gets some pretty interesting boosts and some pretty interesting extra models and more, for me, hobby opportunities to be able to add new cool stuff to my current 6 different kill teams.